and welcome to episode 11 of Painted Bride Quarterly Slush Pile. We've made it past the decade mark, or at least 10 episodes, so I guess we're in our third month too, so we're doing pretty well and enjoying it, and we hope you are. The reason behind this podcast is people always wonder about that mysterious space in between the acceptance or the rejection letter. So we decided to just drop that fourth wall, lift the veil, any cheesy metaphor you'd like, and let you in on at least our editorial process. So I think we'll do a round of introductions first. So I am Kathleen Volk-Miller. I'm director of publishing program here at Drexel and co-editor of the Painted Bride Quarterly, and I write memoir and other creative nonfiction. With me in the studio in Philadelphia today, we have two newbies today, but we'll let them go one at a time. In the studio today, we have Tim Fitz.
Hi, my name is Tim Fitz, and I am a first-year writing teacher here at Drexel, and I teach creative writing also at Penn State Brandywine and Curtis Institute of Music. And I write mostly short stories and sometimes novels.
Fabulous. And a newbie today is Alexa Josefowicz. Tell us about you, Alexa.
I'm Alexa. I'm a rising senior here at Drexel. I am the first student in the accelerated publishing program, so I'm getting my BA in English and master's in publishing. I like to write fiction, creative nonfiction / memoir.
Absolutely. And so let's go to Marion, who is in the same time zone in New York. Yay!
Yay! So happy to be here in your time zone.
Tell us about where you are right now and who you are.
I'm sitting in my tiny little New York apartment looking out onto Morton Street, and I'm so happy cuddled up in this little space. I am Marion Wren. I'm the co-editor of Painted Bride Quarterly. I also run the writing program for New York University in Abu Dhabi, which is what takes me out of your time zone. And I write creative nonfiction. I write some scholarly stuff. And I recently had an article published in a book called Talking Back to Globalization. And the piece is called Strategic Sociability. And it's all about journalists and writers and the Cold War and the importance of cocktail hour as a Cold War strategy. So so that's what I've been working on lately. And yay, Eastern time zone, here I am.
Okay, Jason, where are you today?
I am in Brooklyn. I am Jason Schneiderman. I am an associate professor of English at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. Yes, the associate is recent, and an associate editor at Painted Bride Quarterly. I write mostly poetry, but I have also edited an anthology for freshman composition on queer topics that's out from Oxford University Press. And I just got 1.4 thousand views on Periscope for reading. Actually, a reading I did with the Academy of American Poets and Brain Pickings to commemorate the violence in Orlando. So
Wow!
that's all I'm about. The fact that it was a reading in grief.
Wow.
But I'm in Brooklyn.
1.4 thousand. Does that mean 1,400?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm a little slow on the math. With us today is a very special guest, Jen Knox. Jen,
Hi.
Where are you? And tell us about you.
I am in Nevada, Iowa, which is spelled like Nevada, but we pronounce it wrong. And it is nothing like the other Nevada, and certainly nothing like Las Vegas. I'm about 10 miles outside of Ames and Iowa State University, and I'm a poet, mostly. But I also write some fiction and nonfiction. I just finished an essay for a British poetry magazine called Magma about humor and authority and women writers and how we fit into that. And I'm also, I just received a fellowship from the Iowa Council for the Arts for a crowdsourced poetry project on native Iowa birds called Iowa Bird of Mouth.
Nice.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Bravo.
Thank you. We're gonna try and get everybody in on it at the Iowa DNR and even people over in the State House. I don't even know what you say. I don't even know
What's a DNR?
Department of Natural Resources.
Oh, I heard do not resuscitate.
Me too.
That can't be right.
That's
it
the
also
only
stands for
DNR
that.
I know.
Be weird with birds. You know.
They have little stickers
And
around
I'm
their
really
legs.
happy to be here. I've loved Painted Bride Quarterly forever.
Aw, thank you,
You guys
Jen.
have always been tops to me, so I'm happy to be here.
Yay. Well, we'll find out later. We asked you for many reasons, but we're really happy that you could make it. So glad
Yeah.
that you're here
Thanks for having
virtually in this virtual world that we've created here. Speaking of the virtual world, we have 3 poems by the same author, and the first one has really interesting formatting. And so I think our listeners would be really well off to go to pbq.drexel.edu and hit the pages for this episode and take a look at this poem, because we're going to read it aloud for you, but you need to see it on the page as well, I think. So who of the we would like to read Leafless and get this potty started?
I'll try. This is Marion, and I'm happy to give Laura McCullough's Leafless a go.
All right.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay, this is a poem by Laura McCullough, Leafless. In the end, my mother's shoulders, barely covered and quivering, were like birds. Once I made a dress for her, the fabric creamy white, the print a single brown tree spanning the width with stark branches. It was 1974. I was 14. Each night, I taught myself to sew, feeding the fabric through the foot, thinking how surprised she would be. I remember seeing her in it, how we both loved the gesture, the achievement, and though it fit poorly, the print was enough for us. She wore it once and never again. Let me see her walk out the door in it. Maybe love's architecture is exposed when we try and fail at what we mean. Outside the hospital, winter had flayed everything. The trees charcoaled against the sky, their shadows thumb smudges on the institutional snow hid lawn, and inside the air was redolent of shit, flowers, and chlorine. The first time I changed her clothes, peeling back from her shoulders the blue flecked cotton gown, then sliding a clean pink one up her arms, we held each other in the oily light, spent.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Mare.
Yeah, that's quite a poem.
Great reading.
Thank you. Well, what do you think?
I think I love the moment after the word maybe. Love's architecture is exposed when we try and fail at what we mean. Outside the hospital, winter had flayed everything. I was so in the scene of the 14-year-old making and giving the dress that I forgot the beginning, which was the end of Mom's life, right?
Yeah.
And the outside the hospital was jarring, but in the best of ways. Right?
Yeah, I almost felt like I got so into the story of making the dress that it was sort of hard to go away from it. It was hard to kind of get back to a present.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying, jarring in a good way, was difficult for you?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think the balance is a little. It definitely tilts for me towards the past.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I'm going to disagree. I think that one of the triumphs of this poem is its balance of the two pasts and how much time she spends in each one. I found it to be very, very balanced, and I didn't feel the time shift. I didn't feel a disconnect when she moved from one to the next.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty floored by it.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with Jen. I loved the love's architecture is exposed, and then the use of the words like flayed, charcoaled, like these dark words that are so powerful and kind of go back to the like exposure of love, and its architecture was super great.
Well, I love listening to you guys talk about this because, like, in a way, the poem's moving along this sort of subjective and like this comparison, right, between the image of the dress at 14 and then the gown going on, right, and the poet's present with the mother. And I'm learning a lot about like how to balance, right, that fusion, that juxtaposition of these two images, right. And in McCullough's mind, one's holding the key to the other in a way, right? Or at least one's got the resonance of the other, deepening the significance of the other in a way. And I think I love poems that do that, like using two images to deepen the story of either image, respectively. But I think Jason raises a great point. Like, that's risky business if it's skewing the wrong way, right? Like if it's coming down too heavy on one side and not, opening up the other.
It's a hard thing to balance.
Yeah. I kind of love this poem, though, and I have to say it might be because I'm bringing a little extra info to it. And it's not because I know, anything about Laura's experience with her mother, but we published something by her some years ago, and it was about a thrift store. Kathy, do you remember this essay that she wrote, this piece that she wrote? What I loved about that piece was the way she was very attentive to fabrics, right? And like textiles and how interested she was, right? And so like in some ways I've gotten this bigger continuity. So this poem is like plugging into this, my imagined sense of Laura McCullough's preoccupations with fabrics, right? But here she's spun in a totally different direction, trying to make sense of grief, and the loss of of her mother.
Yeah.
And I do love the way that sort of power moves through the poem in terms of clothing and fabric. Like the generous gesture of the mother wearing this ill-fitting dress as a kind of sign of love is then kind of returned with the daughter changing her clothes when she no longer can.
Having to help her with her hospital gown. Yeah, these two dresses.
I made a note on my copy about how she wore this dress once and never again let me see her walk out of the door in it. And then I kind of went back to the last stanza. The first time I changed her clothes, the sense that like she's in the hospital and she will not walk out of here wearing those clothes.
Yeah.
So that image, kind of like dealing with loss and grief, as Marian was talking about, was really powerful with that connection.
I like how the sewing takes us out of the moment in the poem, because that's sort of what sewing does. This poem mimics the therapeutic effect of sewing, or any type of thoughtful making or work, whatever you're doing, and you get lost in that flow zone, and that's part of the healing process. And there's nothing worse when you're grieving to have nothing to do and just being idle. And so when you turn to something like this, I think it has a very positive effect. And so I do think it's risky doing that in a poem, because you can distract the reader and just have the reader forget what it's about. Or you can make something that's really profound.
She's stitching the pieces together. And the trees and the parking lot of the hospital and the tree on the front of the dress. It's like she has a foot in both places as she's sewing these moments together.
Yeah.
And Jen, look at the third stanza down, the one that is split. It's just so well crafted, and it mimics everything you just said, doesn't it?
Yeah. And what I have to say, one of the things I really admire about the piece too is it resists any kind of like easy sentimentality, right? Like that last line it ends with the word spent, right? Not joy, not closure, not and all's, grief and love and all's right with the world. It is, the second to last stanza, it's the air is redolent of shit, flowers, and chlorine, right? And then the last move is sliding a pink gown up her arms, and we hold each other in the oily light spent, right? So you've got that sort of that oscillation.
Exhaustion.
and exhaustion. Yeah.
I don't really like the tone of shit here. I wish it would have been excrement or something like that. It kind of, it just sort of takes me out of it in not a good way. I mean, it's not like a deal breaker thing. It's just, I'm not crazy about the tone, but it's, just an observation.
I think it's interesting that she put it first. That was a decision.
Yeah.
That was no accident.
In the same vein, I think it was very much like a decision to end with chlorine and this like sense of what that smells like.
Well, yeah, that's great, right? It's sort of like it's the flowers and the chlorine are covering the scent of shit. So she's actually starting with what's being covered, right? It's like what buries it, right? The air fresheners or the attempt at fixing it.
Are we ready? Because we do have a bunch more work to do.
Yeah,
we do.
Should we call it?
I think so. I think we're ready to vote. So in the studio, we'll do our usual 1, 2, 3, thumbs up, thumbs down, and then the rest of the crew will vote remotely, and Joe will let us know what that total is. So 1, 2, 3, shoot.
I voted.
Yes. I think the votes rolled in so quickly. Joe barely had time to spin in his chair and let us know that it is a unanimous yes. So yay, Laura McCullough, Leafless, 1 in. So she's 1-0 going into reclaimed wood. And who would like to read this for us?
Jen, do you want to read it?
Sure.
Great.
Reclaimed wood. I confess now I have begun to henna my red hair gone dull in parts and penny bright in others. And I always tried to subdue its wildness. But when the hull of our marriage busted rock and began to leak, we both thought it was a good idea to renovate the kitchen together by ourselves. Closed up the hall to the back rooms to create more privacy and took down a load-bearing wall in hope of opening the flow. My husband looked like Christ, hauling the salvaged timbers from a warehouse deep in the piney woods, one by one up the front stoop, laying them in our suburban living room, posing as a Brooklyn loft. We framed the new wide space, 1 as header, 2 as column braces, then sat on the floor cross-legged, looking at our work in progress. The way the wood had aged, the colors and striations, notches and hammered pegs. We felt our 50s ranch had a new story now, something with weight, and we held hands a little while before getting up, heading to the shower, falling back into our routine.
Nice reading, Jen. It's lovely to hear your voice in this.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Beautifully done.
Yeah. So this is the second poem by Laura McCullough. And it's interesting to see the way they kind of, I don't know, like both of these poems so far have been about making, right? That sort of like very tactile, the doing of something in order to figure something out, right?
Mm-hmm. And it has the back and forth with the lines, the way the lines, some are like how they indent on and off, which is also the way Ellen Dugan does it in Love Poem I and Thou, which has a lot in common with this.
What's the narrative arc, you guys? Do they go back to the routine? Is that sad at the end? I think it means the marriage is still busted, huh? Or not?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they had sex.
Where?
In the shower.
Oh, interesting.
Getting up, heading into the shower, falling back. I mean, I do think that like the obvious thing is that the relationship doesn't survive. That the marriage, you can rebuild a kitchen, but you can't rebuild desire.
I don't know. Are we cynical? I mean, they do hold hands. That's why I was curious. The storyteller in me was like, what happened? Because I so love the way the first stanza ends with, but when the hull of our marriage busted rock.
Yeah.
Shoot, that's amazing.
It is amazing.
And I really like the lead into, we thought it was a good idea to renovate the kitchen. It's never a good idea to renovate your kitchen. It is never a good idea.
And that whole build-up to renovate our kitchen.
By themselves.
Yeah, that's delicious, right? That they did it together
by ourselves, right?
Really
I was
delicious.
snickering, even though I knew the poem already.
Glad I heard that.
Yeah.
But Jason, I love that you get them to sex, right? And it's if they head to the shower, right, together and by themselves, right? Like that is the most unsexy sex if they're having sex, right? And I love that phrase, Jason. Like you can rebuild a kitchen, but it's really hard to rebuild desire, right? So I think Kathy's question is a good one. I don't know that this is
Well, it's kind of impossible, right?
right.
I mean, you can't. They're turning this 50s ranch into the Brooklyn loft. They're trying to give everything a facelift.
Right.
They're by themselves, and it's kind of a hopeless thing, right?
Right.
Well, I love that she doesn't tell us one way or the other. We're able to read this into it on our own. I mean, if it steered us one way or the other, then it would be kind of a drag to read. You're just led down this way to see them building this kitchen and being irritated with each other. I mean, it could go. I mean, they seem to get along. They hold hands. They take a shower. And she's already healed herself in one poem with making things. But, it's also a kitchen.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess it lets us make up our own minds on how we want to
and it
go
also,
about things.
maybe this is a layer that's not there, but it increases the resale value. So if you do decide to split up,
Oh,
you
shit.
Yeah.
Jason.
you get the court.
I like that.
Right.
I like that layer.
We're
Good.
so cynical. Oh my goodness.
Well, I feel like I'm just going to add to it. I'm really loving the phrase posing as a Brooklyn loft. This idea of posing and how they're posing as a couple. Like, yes, we'll do this great project and it'll just totally bring us back together, and that we're holding hands for a bit, but we get up and we fall back into the routine. That sense of like falling in love or falling out of love.
Okay, how many people think they showered together?
We'll look on that before we go on the phone.
It's so funny. We're like off on this thing about that, and we're right. Ooh, I don't know what the real truth is. If it's true at all, this whole thing could be fictional.
Jen, what did you say? You don't?
I don't find the end of it romantic. If I'm holding hands with somebody and I let go of their hand, that's not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they could have done anything in that space, but she chose to make them hold hands and then let go.
Right, there's also like not a sense of like helping each other get up, like guiding each other to the shower.
But Jason had them showering together, and I did not think they showered together.
Yeah.
Hello? It's Laura McCullough telling us what the real plotline is.
Oh, good.
Laura, by the way, does also have the incredibly beautiful hair described in the poem.
I know, that's why we're all putting Laura here, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And you know what? I don't know, Jen, your reading really was so great, but like we're just hearing about henning the hair. She's also changing herself or trying to get back to something, that once was. Yeah.
And also to start the poem out with this way that I confess, there's almost like this kind of, I don't know if it's shame or that she was hiding something in the sense that she has to now change or admit
Wait,
to.
that means it turned her gray doing this. This turned her hair gray.
Did she?
And in a way, reclaiming the wood is reclaiming the hair that she had when she was young.
Yeah.
Right. And okay, so there's a really raunchy joke to make about wood if we are thinking about showers and sex, but we'll leave that.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome. But the way she's even describing the way her hair has changed over time, that it's dull in some spots and bright in other spots, reminds me of the striation of the wood that she describes too, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this, and all of that becomes a kind of interesting way of talking about the striations and the layers, the dimensions of this busted marriage, right? Like they can feel that it's busted, and they're trying to reclaim what's salvageable.
And I think it's also that way in which when you're living through a really powerful narrative or experience, you begin to see that narrative or experience everywhere.
Yeah.
When you're going through a divorce, you see everything ending after it's been around for a long time. When you're going through grief, you're seeing everything disappearing. When you're falling in love, you see all these hopes and possibilities, and like the way that everything resonates across everything with this like master narrative of reconstruction. I think is really a success of the poem.
Yeah.
Well said.
Do we want to vote? Are we ready to vote?
I think we should.
Okay.
Wait, I'm writing down master narrative of reconstruction. Hold on. Okay.
All right. 1, 2, 3, vote.
Shit, hold on.
Well, 3. We're unanimous yet again. Laura McCullough is now 2-0.
So Laura McCullough.
Unanimous. All these places and editors, so yay. And now we are with the wildly titled Maggot Therapy, a long poem that again our listeners might want to look at while they hear it. Should we even take turns reading it? It's 3 pages, guys. Many stanzas. Do you want to do it, Jason? I bet you can. I bet you can handle it.
I'm sure
I really
take it. Good.
Okay.
Maggot Therapy. Near death, sometimes the hands curve into themselves like claws. I held my mother's open, smoothing the fingers, trimming the wild nails. Once, years before, my husband and I awoke to a fawn caught in the family compost. A whole... Sorry, do I have to start again?
No.
Oh, wait. Okay. I'm going to start again. Can we, edit that out? Something weird happened on my sound feed.
Sure. Well, yeah, we were fine on our end.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I made that. Maggot Therapy. Maggot Therapy. Near death, sometimes the hands curve into themselves like claws. I held my mother's open, soothing the fingers, trimming the wild nails. Once, years before, my husband and I awoke to a fawn caught in the family compost, a hole on its back end festering with worms, and he pinched each one out, swiping his little finger in the bowl of the wound, and coating it with antibiotic salve. I loved him, and how he saved this small thing. It's a story I have told over and over. Today, though, I'm thinking of the medical uses for maggots: biodebridement, an extracorporeal digestion, their enzymes liquefying dead tissue in wounds, and wonder, do I feed off the dead who live inside me? When my mother was dying, she had a vision of her non-corporeal father, brother, sisters. Her last words, "Why have you left me alone?" She never opened her eyes again, but her chest a drowning well. The bodily signs of death, the skin mottling as blood flow slows, breathing open-mouthed, jaw unhinged. I won't recount the signs of a dying marriage, but he left 2 days after her funeral. Physically, he returned, but told me he'd fallen in love with someone else, that his love for me had passed. Above my mother's body, orange mist had exhaled and dispersed. A light bulb busted open, its luminescent gas escaping. The word fluorescent is so similar to the word fluorescence, meaning flowering. And somewhere between these two, there is a splendor I can barely stand. Inflorescence refers to flowers clustering on one branch, each a separate floret. But if they are tightly clustered, as in the dandelion seed head, they look incomplete alone, though the whole is an illusion. The word for this, pseudanthium, means false flower. In frutescence, its fruiting stage gives us grapes, ears of corn, stalks of wheat, so many of the berries we love. This morning, my hands ache as though in the night I've been trying to claw my way out of a hole I am down in, having lost the body I came into this world through, and my husband's as well. It's almost as if my body had come to believe his was a part of its own, a connection he would have to break or die. Medical experts say it takes 2 moltings for maggots to do the job well, to feed enough to clean a wound. I do not feel clean at all, though in our shower, my husband and I still huddle some days, hunched into the spray. We call it watering. When we do, we scrub each other, grateful for the living, dying flesh, but trying to get clean of each other. That fawn he saved way back when we were new in love was released into the wild. Surely it had a scar identifying it, evidence
That
of what
was a
flesh
lot,
my husband was
Jason,
willing
all
to
those
enter
tricky words.
in order to keep something alive. Lately,
Yeah.
he seems more clear-eyed, and it is as if a cicatrix husk is cracking. Neither of us know who will emerge, but he seems luminescent, a kind of light created by the excitation of the smallest elements and not giving off warmth, but a cold glow that at least illuminates.
That was a lot, Jason. All those tricky words.
Right?
Oh, it was such a joy to read. That poem feels so good in the mouth. Like it's like a choreographed ballet for your tongue.
Well, it's to listen to it. It is a tour de force, right? The way she's able to move, right, through these images and into this sort of drawing on a very sort of, rational, dictionary quality sort of recitation of definition in order to unpack the decay in this marriage, and a decay and transformation, frankly, So bravo, Jason, that was a beautiful reading.
Well, and for me, a lot of what I think is so powerful about this poem is how objectivity becomes a kind of selflessness, or that she's in using this kind of language of the gardener, and using this kind of language of the scientific observer who tries to catalog and find the taxonomy. She's able to see the husband going through this metamorphosis that at the moment is destroying her.
Right.
She's still able to kind of observe and catalog. And it's just, oh my God. I mean, and knowing how painful that is and how carefully it's observed is just devastating.
But Jason, I thought you just put your finger on what feels like a real paradox in the poem too. It's like, if she's achieving a kind of like objectivity / selflessness, it's the poem is structured around this series of like really subjective stitching of images, right? So again, it's this practice of this like subjective validation. Like, how is it
I started before this poem was read. I was like, it's long,
image through which she's able to talk about
just
her
so well managed.
Like, that's totally McCullough's capacity as a poet to fuse that, which feels
so
really subjective. But then that gets erased out into this kind of stance of objectivity.
Oh,
which
stop.
I think
I knew you were going to talk about that.
Freaking awesome.
That reminds me of your work, Jason. Yeah, and the selflessness of taxonomy, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a little bothered by the antibiotic sound.
Before this poem was read, I was like, it's long.
Because I just can't believe that
it's
a
just
deer
so well
needs
managed.
our pharmaceuticals
I
to get
don't
by
care where to
in the wild.
use.
And if
It's just
that
so well
bothers me
managed.
a little bit. I mean, I know it's just maybe the husband goes out
And they
there
were
puts
showering together.
antibiotics on it, but
Oh,
I'm
stop.
also a little bothered by the
Yeah, but it's not a happy shower.
I'm not selfless.
Right. Because they're eating dead material, and so they're
not a
actually
sexual
cleaning the
shower,
wound.
the watering.
So maybe that's part of it. Maybe his cleaning the wound and putting the antibiotic salve.
I'm a
part
little
of
bothered
one
by
of
the
his flaws.
antibiotic salve
Maybe it works as a metaphor.
because I just can't believe that a deer needs our pharmaceuticals to get by in the wild. And that bothers me a little bit. I mean, I know it's just maybe maybe the husband goes out there and puts antibiotic salve on it, but I'm also a little bothered by the worms in the festering worms in the hole in its back. Because they're eating dead material, and so they're actually cleaning the wound. So, maybe that's part of it. Maybe his cleaning the wound and putting the antibiotic salve was one of his flaws. Maybe it works as a metaphor.
There's only one species of maggot and fly that only feeds on dead flesh. Every other species of maggot and fly will actually like eat the host. And this is like a whole like pre-antibiotic thing that like I guess it was like I don't remember if it was World War I or World War II or the 1930s, but
can't even see him on his back.
This treatment was discovered that you could treat particularly open wounds and separating wounds with this one particular maggot.
Maggots work on deer.
However, the psychological effect of soldiers waking up to discover their wounds infected with maggots
Right.
Was so devastating that most doctors kind of agreed, like, yeah, this kind of works.
I think I'm really into Tim's idea because the husband, he comes back
that I think that the deer is better off.
This idea that like he thinks
But a
he's
deer is not going to be
helping,
freaked out by the maggots.
I mean, the deer doesn't know it has maggots, but I'm also saying it's extremely unlikely that the blue bottle fly was the exact fly who had laid the maggots in that
Interesting.
I bet more maggots work on deer than people, though, because they've got tougher immune systems. They're built for that.
I'm going to stay on the side of he saved that deer.
Oh, he totally didn't save the deer. He may have helped his own
But
mind.
you think they called some like animal control board or something after they fixed the wound?
The husband, he comes back physically, like he stays. This idea that like he thinks he's helping, but in a way he's hurting even more, carries over to the image that like he comes back, but he's like, I don't really love you. Like I'm here, but I'm just going to continue inflicting some pain.
I like that. I like that reading of it.
I just would like to thank Jason Schneiderman for once again proving that we don't need Google.
It didn't go back
When
to
you
the
have
wild after
Schneiderman,
they got their hands on it.
There is no
Somebody else
need
released
for
it
the
into the
Googling.
wild.
But do you think they called some like animal control board or something after they fixed
It
the
also
wound?
knows a thing or two about wild. Yeah, that passive tense makes me think that it didn't stop. They did not heal the deer. That's.
Yeah, what is that? I didn't know what that meant. It seems. I just would like to thank Jason Schneiderman for once again proving that we don't need Google. When you have Schneiderman, there's no need for the Googling.
Well, and also Tim Fitz, coyote expert, right? I remember.
He also knows a thing or two about worms.
Jason, can you say cicatrix husk one more time? I really liked that.
I have to see the letters before I can say it.
Yeah, what is that's? I didn't know what that meant. It seems.
So if we're not Googling, I want
So
Jason
the
to say
scar
it.
is
and then
cracking.
tell
The
me
scar is
what it
reopening.
is. It's second to last stanza.
Cicatrix husk.
Yeah, me too.
What the
Yeah,
hell is
like the
that?
shell would be left
Is that
behind.
a
Wow.
cicada? Is that like
So
a
it's a
cicada?
seal.
I Googled it.
It's a scar that is cracking.
I turned off my microphone so you wouldn't hear my keyboard. And I was wrong. I also thought that a cicatrix was a kind of cicada, but it is not. It is actually the scar of a healed wound or the scar on the bark of a tree.
Oh, interesting. Hey. Huh.
So the scar is cracking. The scar is reopening. Yeah.
It was the word husk of it that made me think it was an insect.
Yes. Yeah, me too. Yeah. I'm not promoting. Wow. Tim Fitz is pulling an Irish goodbye as we speak, but he left his vote in my hands. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to do something with both my thumbs. 1, 2, 3.
I think that once we started like talking about
We have the affirmative in the studio.
sort of externals of the narrative, it sort of means
New
that
York
we've
and Iowa.
kind of left
It's, again,
the discussion
unanimous.
of the poem itself.
So wow,
Maybe we should
Laura
vote.
McCullough. Yes. I'm up for voting. Of course. Tim Fitz is pulling an Irish goodbye as we speak. But he left his
heard of a
vote
French
in my
goodbye. Is there
hands.
tongue involved?
So
right.
I'm going to put I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to do something with both my thumbs.
I thought Irish goodbye was the one where you just leave.
Yeah.
That's what an Irish goodbye. What's a French
I
goodbye?
think the Irish goodbye just
in
you
the
have to be
studio,
drunk when you.
and
Touche.
New York and Iowa. It's again unanimous. So
Laura
I don't think there's a French goodbye.
Laura McCullough.
Yes.
Can I ask a slightly off-topic question?
Of course.
What is the difference between an Irish goodbye and a French goodbye?
I've never heard of a French goodbye.
I think the French
I
would
thought
kiss
the
you
French
long.
goodbye was when you just sort of left, that, like you just sort of disappear. But then someone said that an Irish goodbye actually has like a different
That's a
component to
French
it. You do
goodbye.
something
In the
else.
shower.
I
Don't pay
thought
for your tears.
Irish goodbye was the one where you just leave.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
That's what an
I
Irish
thought the
goodbye.
Irish
That's a French
goodbye
I
goodbye.
think the Irish goodbye is just
How
you
did
have
you
to be
call
drunk.
Have I just been incorrectly calling
She would
the
feel
Irish goodbye a
bad
French
for doing the
goodbye?
Irish
Darling, I
goodbye,
don't
so
think
she'd have
there's
to
a
go around
French
and tell
goodbye.
you.
I think maybe I made it. All right.
So, well, listen.
I don't know how
let's,
that makes it
let's talk for a
French.
couple minutes.
Like,
Right.
in a way. That doesn't seem very
We
French
invited
to me.
Jennifer Knox to join us today
I think
because
the
she's
French
a
would
poet
kiss you
and a
long.
friend, and
They feel great.
and we've published her before.
That's a French goodbye.
And we
My
No.
version of the Irish goodbye is always
Pardon me?
to walk around everybody saying, I'm taking an Irish goodbye.
well, and we know Laura McCullough, and usually the Painterbrick Quarterly best practices is
She would
if
feel bad
a
for
certain
doing the Irish
team,
goodbye.
whether if New York knows a particular poet, New York will
So,
boot it
well,
down to
listen,
Philly,
let's,
or
let's
vice
talk for a
versa,
couple
or
minutes.
at least the person who feels
We
really
invited
close
Jennifer
to the
Knox
poet
to join
might
us today
recuse him or
because she's a
herself.
poet and friend.
And this
And,
this particular event of discussing
and
Laura
we've
McCullough's
published her
poems
before.
made us think
And
about
we-
all of
Crazy
those things
poems,
because
too.
we can't.
Pardon me?
Abu Dhabi, New
Crazy
York, and
poems,
Philly.
too.
Yeah.
This is the only
Well,
time we discuss
and,
poems together, or
and
when we
know Laura
podcast.
McCullough,
right?
And usually
And we
the
all
Painterbrick
know Laura
Quarterly,
and have
best
different,
practices is if
levels of
a
friendship
certain
with
team,
her.
Whether
But,
if New York knows.
I just
a
wanted to
particular
talk
poet,
some
New
about
York will boot
all
it
of
down
those
to
lines, how
Philly, or
difficult
vice
it is to
versa,
be
or at least the
a
person
poet
who
and send your
feels
work out to
really
editors
close to
you
the
know
poet might
because you don't want
recuse him or
them to feel
herself.
obligated.
And
yet
this
it's also hard to be an
particular event of
editor
discussing
and
Laura McCullough's
reject your
poems,
friends
made us
or
think
feel
about
as
all of
objective
those
as
things
one needs
because
to
we
be.
can't Abu
So,
Dhabi,
discuss.
New York, and Philly. All this is the only time we discuss poems together, or when we podcast.
What are your thoughts?
Right? And we all know Laura and have different levels of friendship with her, but I just wanted to talk some about all of those lines, how difficult it is to be a poet and send your work out to editors you know because you don't want them to feel obligated, and yet it's also hard to be an editor and reject your friends or feel as objective as one needs to be. So discuss. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm super curious to hear Jason and Jen talk about this because I've been lucky enough, working with PBQ for as long as we have, to see their careers evolve from being pals in grad school to having multiple books published. And as you noted, Kathy, we've published Jen's work over the years, and it's been like a delight and treat to see the poems in PBQ. And Kathy and I have been in this position as editors for so long. We're actually seeing, a generation of poets come through and a field form, right? And I don't know. I think I'm a believer in what I keep calling a kind of strategic sociability. Like that is your cultural capital, right? Like who where they're placed, and then trusting on their, aesthetics and their ethical judgment about the quality of the work. I think it's actually a good thing for the field of poetry.
I always feel like, actually, because I know, I think networking, and you probably know the origin of the term networking, that it was, some study where they found out that people who'd graduated, it was Harvard or MIT or Yale, right? That they were all friends with each other and they all got each other jobs. And then everyone was like, oh, okay, so let's institutionalize this thing, networking, which is similar to mentoring, right? Has been institutionalized. And now when you show up at a job, you get assigned a mentor. And if you've had an actual mentor, that's crazy pants, that's not how that works. And for me, it's been almost the opposite, where there are a lot of people who I'd really like to be friends with, but I don't really like their work. And you kind of can't be I don't know, maybe Jen will disagree with me on this, but it's like, if you really like someone, but every poem that you read by them and everything they send you, you're kind of like, oh yeah, not good. It's really, really hard to be friends because there's this part that's like really central to them. And I feel so lucky, you know, that like Jen.
It's kind of impossible.
Right?
You tell them the truth, and you can't really be friends with someone that you can't tell the truth to.
Right.
Right. So like you hear all these stories about like, oh, you know, like, oh, they're networking and they're like, you know, creating this kind of like, you know, mutual admiration society. And it's like, well, and it almost sounds like nepotistic and
Right.
I don't know, like
I think one aspect
like
of that.
very, very self-serving, but I like my own experience has really not been that like, you know, like certainly I'm so grateful for like my friendship with like Jen, I love you.
I love you too.
I love your work.
Vice versa.
Yeah, but like I feel really grateful and lucky. I don't feel like that was like, and yeah, I definitely. I mean, in part, I did go to grad school to meet you, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, not necessarily knowing that it was you, but I went to grad school thinking like I'm going to meet a cohort of people whose like work I love and who are dedicated to poetry and who I care about.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I mean, I maybe I'd be better off if I could lie more and like tell people. You know what I mean? I love
like
reading your work and I love you, and I mean I guess it is advent. I guess from the outside that looks like something else, and it looks like from the inside maybe.
Well, I think if we didn't like each other's work, but we were still friends. We just wouldn't talk about our work.
Right.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be part of our friendship.
I also knew your work before I knew you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you
Yeah, me too.
wanting to
Yeah, because
interject
we were
here,
meeting
Alexa?
in workshops, so we were seeing what each other were doing and liking that, and then that was kind of prompting us to be like, hey.
I don't know if it's like a
I
not
think,
right.
I think you and I are both chatty. No matter what we're writing, we're talking to somebody, and I'm starting to see starting to figure out how rare that is.
But it's not your best work.
That the act of this is not.
You need to just keep working.
Poetry is not about communication for a lot of poets.
Yeah.
So I think we share that.
Have the ability to create this
That
really great
we're
poem.
communicators.
And even having that like friendship to fall back on, being like I've read these things,
wanting
like
to interject
haven't
here,
sent them
Alexa?
out.
I'm just
Like,
thinking
that
about
kind
that
of poem would
communication
be better.
aspect and saying
Right.
like I don't think it's like a lie or you're not
Yes.
intending
Right.
to hurt someone by
But
being
so
like
that
didn't like rejecting their poem in a sense that it seems as if the relationship between
But so what do we say
Jason
to
and Jen has
poets
that ability to be like
who are out there
I
and
like
they're
this poem,
shaking
but it's not your
hands and
best work.
they send us cover
and
letters
for
that
that,
say,
like,
I met you at
need to just keep working
AWP.
on it.
And even though we
Having that
met
ability to be like,
3,000 people at AWP, you know,
but like
we
keep going and
are
like I
supposed
know
to
you
look at
have
the
the
poem
ability to
differently
create this
because
really great
we
poem.
shook somebody's
And even having
hand
that
or,
like friendship to
you know,
fall back on, being like I've read these things, like you haven't sent them out, like that kind of poem would be better.
Right. We're not just blowing smoke.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But so that-
I mean, I try and be as helpful as I can be, and I know Jason's taught me a ton.
Yeah. But so what do we say to poets who are out there and they're shaking hands and they send us cover letters that say, I met you at AWP. And even though we met 3,000 people at AWP, you know, we are supposed to look at the poem differently because we shook somebody's hand or, you know.
Well, you know, it's. I think I want to just flip that around a little bit too. It's like, okay, so PBQ has such a diverse aesthetic, right? Like these editorial boards in Philly, Abu Dhabi, and New York, right? Like in a way, have, you know, so many different voices at the editorial table. And that was really part of the spirit of this podcast, is to sort of share what that conversation's like when you have a bunch of different people with a bunch of different opinions and no single editorial vision. Like there's not one person at the helm saying, this is a PBQ poem, right? That aesthetic is actually built through this kind of conversation. So how do you then, let's say a friend sends you work and it gets rejected, right? Like that is a behind the scenes kind of piece of information that it's great to be able to share this podcast, right? Like there's so many people talking about the work that it's not nepotistic. It can't be nepotistic, right? For PBQ, certainly. It's not like the editor gets to say, okay, I'm publishing my friends.
Right.
But the discussion has to come through like, layers of people before we're able to go to print. Or
And
go
the
to
podcast makes that transparent, what the process is.
yeah. Yeah.
I think shows how slow it is, right? It's a really time-consuming process. But also, I think it's nice that I think the podcast shows that it's a very respectful process. But I think a lot of people's worst fears or of editorial
I think we
committees
talked
are gonna
about
be
that a
like,
little bit before about being gatekeepers
we're all these
and
kind of like 1950s
looking for what's
cigar-chomping
good
men
rather
who are
than looking
surrounded
for
by,
what's negative. I think we
quote,
do hope
Dem's,
with
book
every
title.
file we
or
open
just kind of like enjoying. I mean,
that
I've
we will
received
be
letters
blown away
as
and enamored,
not as an editor
right?
at Painted
We're looking
Bride,
for
but,
what's good.
as an editor at Bellevue, kind of accusing me of, wanting to shut down certain voices. And it's like, well, no, I mean, I don't get voices and say like, like I hate this. I don't want it to go out there, and I hate you for writing it.
Right.
I think we talked about that a little bit before about being gatekeepers and looking for what's good rather than looking for what's negative. I think we do hope with every file we open that we will be blown away and enamored, right? We're looking for what's good.
Well, and I always say, like, the other side of gatekeeping is curating. And I always try to think of myself as a curator. Like, if I thought I was a gatekeeper, I'd kill myself. And if I thought that my job was to keep out people, for whatever reason, I wouldn't, like, that's just not, I wouldn't do that. But curating, like, really thinking, like, okay, this is something that I need to give to a readership. Like, that's how I kind of value my job. And I understand that there has to be a gatekeeping function in that, right? I understand that there is. If we're saying no, we're saying no.
To jump into that too, it's like, okay, so then what's the difference there too between, say, like curating and soliciting, right? So you go to a reading, you're blown away by somebody, or you happen to know a poet who's working on a really cool project and you would love to see it in PBQ. Maybe that's an act of solicitation, which is in fact something that our editors do. And then the flip side of that is like, okay, so what if a poet reaches out to you and says, hey, I know you, not just I've met you at AWP, but like we were hanging out and we were talking about this project, maybe it fits for PBQ. Right. And so, and that I will pay attention to that. Like, how could I not? Right. Like, I definitely want to bring that to the table. But PBQ does have these sort of this ritual of democratic discussion. Like, that is just the nature of this magazine.
I'll say for our New York staff, our general rule is you withdraw if you think you can't be objective.
Right.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you're right. Like one, like when you hear something you love and you run up to the person and say like, hey, can we have that? Which I know we've all done. That's kind of like the best version of curation. But it also happens that sometimes when you run up to that person and then you look at it on a piece of paper 2 weeks later with 5 people in a room who weren't there when this amazing reading happened, everyone's kind of like, oh, like, wow, that I can see how that was a really amazing evening when you were there. But
I'm glad to hear it was so awesome at the time.
This really doesn't need to be.
And Jen,
given
that's
to all
my
the
excuse.
And
That's
I've also
what
had
I use
other
even when I
experience where like I
solicit.
meet someone
First of all,
I really
think
like
Painted by
them,
Quarterly solicits
and,
less
they know
than
that I'm an
lots of
editor
other
and they send me work,
magazines.
and
So let's get that said. We are definitely more
it's just
open
not
to
good.
our slush pile than
and our
lots
rule,
of other
is you
mags.
have to
But
because a
when
lot of
I
times
see
I'll be looking
somebody
at something
read something
and I
at a
really like the
reading,
person,
that's
but I
how
know
I
that the
begin the
work
conversation.
isn't
Look, this will have
something
to
that I
go through a
wanna
democratic
send out to
editorial
readership.
Or that it
policy,
fits.
but I'd love to see that on the
It's not
page.
just a matter of, it's not just a matter of your personal
and then that
taste.
way I
That's
can
why you
blame
have
all
so
of you
many
guys.
people on staff.
Right.
Because it isn't a reflection of one
I don't have to not be
person's
friends
taste.
with awful poets.
Right, and Jen, that's my excuse. That's what I use even when I solicit.
Yeah.
First of all, I think Painted by Quarterly solicits less than lots of other magazines. So let's
just
get
use
that
passive
said. We are
voice.
definitely
The
more
board,
open to our
the
slush
board.
pile than lots of other mags. But when I see somebody read something at a reading, that's how I begin the conversation. Look, this will have to go through a democratic editorial policy, but I'd love to see that on the page. You know, and then that way I can blame all of you guys. And I don't have to not be friends with awful poets.
Oh god.
Or you can blame the board if that poet is your friend. It
Blame the
wasn't
board.
me. Like I liked it.
Yeah. Just use passive voice. The
Right?
board.
The corporate veil. The corporate veil.
Jen, have you had weird experiences
Did you
with
ever get
other
in?
journals
You
where
still
they
haven't
solicit
gotten
you
in that
and then
particular mag? That's
behave in
interesting.
odd ways?
I was just
Without naming names, you have like
a big one. And every time I saw the editor of it, he said, send us stuff. And they shut me down in record time because the poetry editor was different than the managing editor.
Oh wow.
And it was like, come
Right,
over here,
right.
give me a hug. No, we don't want hugs from you. It was funny.
Oh.
Right.
Did you ever get in?
Yeah.
You still haven't gotten
Nope.
in that particular mag? That's
Nope.
interesting.
Well, don't hug them anymore.
But I think what the managing editor was doing was by asking me to solicit without, I think he just knew who he was, but not my work. Who I was, but not my work.
Uh-huh.
So I think that would be his response in general to any poet who he knew who the poet was.
Right.
Like if I know who you are, that means you're knowable. And I want knowable people in this magazine.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is the poetry editor's job to say, I have to reflect the taste of a wider group here.
Yeah.
So Jen, I love that you use this word taste, right? Like I'm really fascinated in how taste shifts and changes and how it gets constructed. And one of the things I really love about the PBQ project is the sort of like the social construction of it, right? Like how we're all bringing our different sensibilities and yet arriving, right, at a consensus. Like the poems today, Laura's poems, like, this is quality on the page, right? And quality when Jason's reading it out
Can we
loud,
quote
and we can all
you?
hear it, right? We can all sort of weigh into that. And I don't know, I think that's a sort of, it's slippery and fascinating and is endlessly interesting to talk about.
Yeah.
I just went through this with students in a writing class. They wanted to know, well, how do we submit to magazines? And I said, well, let's take a look at some magazines and we're going to figure out what the heart to brains to balls ratio is.
Yeah, we're definitely
amazing.
quoting you, Knox.
Right, that's like the next.
PBQ has a high balls.
Marion and I are always looking for T-shirt ideas. Biggest balls in poetry.
Quote you.
But it's very balanced.
Yeah.
is this in your humor essay? Because I know the balls to brain to heart ratio.
You're
but-
heavy on the brain, and then when you get those balls in, it just cuts your throat.
I have to, okay, can you please figure out what the emoticons or emojis are for that? Because
Balls?
I want that on a t-shirt immediately.
I want it.
Yeah, we're definitely quoting you, Knox.
Right, that's gonna be like the next
Sure,
sticker we
yeah.
make.
Marvel
Marion and I are
Marvel
always looking for T-shirt
superheroes
ideas. Biggest balls in
Everybody's
poetry.
got that unique ratio.
Yeah, that's true.
Really, what determines what the voice is like is really the secondary characteristic. And I would be hard pressed to say whether it's brains or balls on, or brains or heart on PBQ, because you guys are very equal, but there's so many literary magazines out there that lead with the brain,
Yeah.
and that's like a 90% of the ratio, and then the other two are just sort of incidental. They wouldn't really want anything from me.
But I love that that the equation is like, and the theory there is that it's the secondary characteristic.
Oh
that
my
defines
goodness.
the voice, right? So it comes on strong as either all brain or all balls, right? But it's really that secondary characteristic that's going to land a poem, right? Or land an essay or piece of fiction in the journal, right? Because it is the combination of the two things. Jennifer Knox, that is brilliant.
I love it.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. That is a terrific note
It also
to
works
end
for
on,
Marvel,
and something to
comic,
just continue to
superheroes, and
contemplate.
villains.
And we'll put all that up on
Way
our
to talk about it with a class
podcast
because
pages, which live
Joker
on our
and
website,
Deadpool are both
pbq.drexel.edu, is
That's
where you
true.
can
That's true.
look at
Oh my
the
goodness.
poems
But
and
Deadpool
read
is
along
heart
with us.
and Joker
Look
is
at them
His
later
heart
because I
and
know
his
you
heart
want to
is
revisit
so
everything that we
skinny.
explore. And each
It's
one of our
because he lives
episodes
with the blind
has
lady.
its own Facebook event.
hero
So
and not a
please
villain.
tell us
Right, and it's the
what you're
secondary
thinking.
characteristic that
Makes
skews him towards hero,
Subscribe,
not
tell your
villain.
friends.
Got
Send
it.
us a
Good.
self-addressed stamped
Brilliant.
envelope. Yes,
I
they
love
still
it.
make stamps.
Thank you, guys.
And we will send you a sticker for your laptop that advertises this.
Continue to contemplate,
And,
we'll put all
yeah,
that up on our
keep reading, keep writing.
podcast pages, which live on our website.
Thank you, everyone.
abq.drexel.edu is where you can look at the poems and read along with us. Look at them later because I know you
That'll
want to
be our new
revisit everything
sign-off.
that we
Balls out.
explore. And each one of our episodes has its own Facebook event. So please tell us what you're thinking. Subscribe, tell your friends, send us a self-addressed stamped envelope. Yes, they still make stamps. And we will send you a sticker for your laptop that advertises this. And yeah, keep reading, keep writing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Balls out, shall I say? Balls out.
Sign off.
This podcast is produced through a joint venture of Drexel University's Office of Information Resources and Technology and the Painted Bride Quarterly Magazine. This podcast is the property of Painted Bride Quarterly Magazine. All rights reserved.